Hi, my name is Sage, and this week I'm going to turn this idea of a snake and a mushroom and some gemstones into reality. So we're going to do that together. Yay! And in order to get started, we're going to need some tin foil. And with this tin foil, I'm going to be folding it. And right now, I am just going to be making the stem of the mushroom. I know it doesn't look like much right now, but I am just making the outside of it. And then I'm going to crinkle some more tin foil, and that'll be the inside, so like the meat of the mushroom. And then I take the hot glue gun and glue them both together. A tip with the hot glue gun, when you're gluing tin foil, it can really burn you when you're putting hot glue onto tin foil, and I just wanted to mention that because you can get burned fingers. This is one side of the mushroom stem, and then I do the exact same thing and then glue them both together. I also made the bottom of the mushroom just more meaty just in general because I just like that shape for mushrooms. And now I'm making the head part of the mushroom. And for the top part, just to get like the base of like the meaty sections, I'm turning the tin foil kind of into like a ravioli type of shape. Before then, I continue to build upon it. So I'm just adding layer and layer after it until I'm satisfied. And for this instance, I added another 2 more layers, and you can really do whatever you want. It's your mushroom, be free! And now I'm hot gluing the bottom of what I made, and the reason why is just to hold everything in place, and I'm just smushing it around with a popsicle stick. And then once that's done, I get some more tin foil. And now I'm going to be cutting more so the flared part of the cap of the mushroom, and to do that, I'm just cutting a semi-decent circle out of tin foil. And then I add onto that circle because I can't cut circles, right? And then I glue those 2 pieces of tin foil together to make one giant circle. Then I end up taking a wooden round that I got from the dollar store, and I end up taking the cap part of the mushroom and just bending the tin foil around it to make it much more of a cohesive circle. And once I bend the tin foil around the circle, I notice that some parts are too long, so I end up taking those parts off. And now I'm ready to glue the cap part to the ravioli part. And then I smush them together to make sure that they'll hold, and then I end up going around the cap part and just kind of smush in all the edges together. And now it's time to glue the stem to the cap. And once I press them both together and they're good to go, this is what it looks like so far. And then once I looked at it, I realized I hated it, and I want to add even more tin foil to the mushroom. And that's exactly what I do, add even more. And then I make another ravioli shape, and I put that up top of the mushroom's cap, and then I take the outer parts of the cap and fold it in on itself, so then it's a smaller mushroom, but it's meatier. And then I take the hot glue gun and I hot glue all the pieces, because now there's 3. There's the ravioli underneath, there's the cap part, and then there's the ravioli on top. So I'm just going around and gluing everything together. And after all that, I still wasn't satisfied, so I added even more tin foil. And I end up doing this process another 2 more times before I'm finally satisfied with how thick the mushroom is. So now that I'm happy with how thick it is, I end up taking a popsicle stick and just smoothing everything out so there's not any big crinkles, because I'm going to be putting paper mache up top of it. And this is what it looks like, all smoothed out, and I'm happy with the thickness. And now it's time for the paper mache. And here are my newspaper cuttings. And here's the paper mache. Pause if you want to read the recipe. Another reason why I dyed mine purple is just so it would be easier to see on camera. So absolutely do not worry about that part. It doesn't affect it at all. And I just really like purple. And for the paper mache process, I am putting the goop on first, and then I'm putting the newspaper clipping, and then I'm putting the goop on after it as well, just to really lock everything in and kind of just smooth everything out as best as I can as well. And I find it's a lot easier to do that when it's a lot more wet rather than dry. Smooth everything out. And I do notice too, because this is my first time using a paintbrush, I would highly recommend using a paintbrush if you are doing like any type of paper mache stuff, just because I find it easier to really get into divots. And this is the first layer I do of the paper mache. I do end up doing the second layer off screen just because it's the exact same process. And this is what the first layer of the paper mache looks like on the mushroom. And since the first layer is done, I can now build the snake around the mushroom. And just like the mushroom, I end up using the tin foil for the base. And for this part, I'm just kind of taking the tin foil and folding it in a semi-cylinder shape just to kind of get a snaky feel for it because I'm not sure if I want to add to it, if I want to take it away. So I end up taking the mushroom and wrapping it around it to see what it would look like. And just like the mushroom, I decided it needs more tin foil. So I then do the exact same thing as I did before, just kind of make like a cylinder shape out of the tin foil, and then I end up hot gluing those two together so then I can wrap it around the mushroom so he can be a longer snake. And now that I'm happy with the shape of the snake, I add even more tin foil. And the reason why is just to bulk him up for later. And just like the mushroom, because I added more tin foil layers, I do end up going in and hot gluing just to make sure everything stays together. So I just go around the snake filling in any gaps where there needs to be with hot glue. And then I smooth out the bottom half of the snake with a popsicle stick so then I can start adding the clay onto it. And these are the colors that I have. I'm going to be using the green and the yellow. But first I gotta use my rolling pin that I got from the dollar store and smooth everything out. And then I end up putting the smooth parts on the smooth part of the snake, and I'm just adding more as I go. I'm also smoothing the clay with a popsicle stick as I go as well. And then I continue on with smoothing more of the tin foil on the snake until all of the top parts completed. And now I can add more clay to the snake because it's more smoothed out. And that is exactly what I do. I add more parts of green to the snake, and I end up smoothing it out a little bit more with the popsicle stick. And right now I'm thinking I'm doing pretty good. This is my second clay sculpture ever, and I'm pretty proud of me. And then I run out of green clay and I end up flattening out the yellow. So I continue with yellow up the snake, but in my mind I'm also thinking that it doesn't overly matter because I am gonna paint the snake white because I do want a white snake. I'm not too concerned about the colors right now, just that I need the clay. And the longer that I went on, the more bumps and lumps I end up noticing. So I do end up adding more yellow clay off screen, and all that I'm doing is just literally just pressing in yellow clay and then smoothing it with the popsicle stick. And then I continue this process until I'm happy with how the snake looks. I know I'm not going to be able to get him perfect, but I want to get him to a version that I'm happy with, and I definitely do end up doing this. And then I was looking at his face and I was like, you know what, you need a bigger face, so I'm gonna do that. And so I get another yellow clay ready to go. And now I'm taking apart the head that was on the snake, and the reason why I'm doing this is so that I can add more tin foil to it, and it's because the clay needs to bake all the way through, so I want the majority of the bulk to be the tin foil and not the clay itself, just so everything can bake evenly. And with adding more and more to the face, I realized I didn't like something, and I finally realized what it was, and it's his nose. I made it too long. He looks like kind of like an elf shoe, and I didn't want that. And so I cut his nose off and started again. And by just removing that little bit, I really liked the shape of his face a lot better. And then I mostly just add the little cheek flaps at the bottom of his face, and then it's on to making the eyeballs. And the nose holes too. And to make the indents, I'm just using the blades of the scissor and just kind of digging into the clay. And then I make two little spheres out of clay for his eyeballs. One is just going to be a placeholder, while the other one is going to be used for both of them. The one that I'm going to use for both of them is the one that gets cut in half right here, and the reason why is, again, it's just because the thickness, half of a sphere is way easier to bake than a full sphere, and that was the reasoning behind that. And then I use a popsicle stick to just kind of smush it in there, make sure everything looks all nice and tidy. And then I take the placeholder eye out of the second one and then put the half sphere in that one. And now it's oven time. He's all ready to go. So this is before and this is after. As you can tell, he's not as shiny anymore, and you can just really see the moisture has pretty much left. So now the second layer of the paper mache is now dried, and the snake is dried, so now they are both ready to get painted. But before I start painting the mushroom, I do just go around the cap with the scissors and just cut off the little edges that poke out, just for cleanup. But now that since they're both good to go, they need a base to go on, and I'm using the wooden round from earlier, and I'm painting it with 2 layers of the dark umber. And this is what it looks like when it's all painted. And then I used these colors, the white titanium and the buff titanium, in order to make the first layer for the snake. So the reasons why I chose like the yellow color and the white was because I kind of wanted to do an eggshelly white type of color, because I didn't want a stark white, but it just wasn't working. I put on layer upon layer and you could still see the yellow and the green underneath no matter what I did. So I ended up going over it with 6 layers of the titanium white, and then you finally could not see the yellow and the green clay underneath. And I end up doing that off screen. And this was the first layer of the buff titanium and the titanium white. Again, 6 layers of titanium white later, and you cannot tell that that was the first layer. So then I decided to work on the mushroom, and I used the white titanium and the burnt umber and mix those 2 colors together to do the mushroom. And with the mushroom, I've also noticed that it dried a lot quicker than the clay. The clay took forever to dry, but the paper mache, I pretty much went over like the second layer right after the first layer because it was almost completely dried. And for the stem, I end up using the white titanium and the buff titanium, and the reason why is just because mushrooms usually have like a lighter stem than the actual cap itself, so I decided to stick with that. And this is me going over the second time with the paint. I'm using the exact same paint colors. I do notice, I don't really see it too much on screen, but in real life I could definitely notice like the purple shining through, which ended up being good because it just gave it a little bit more dimension. So that's just something that you should know too. If you do dye your paper mache, the colors might also seep through too, but in this case it was a good thing. And then for the final step of the stem, I used the burnt umber, and I use it more so as a wash, so very watered down, and I put that all over the stem. And now the snake is completely painted. 6 layers of titanium white later, and he is good to go. And now it's time to paint his eyes, and I use the titanium white and the cadmium red, and I mix them together to make like a really light pink color, and I put that color on both of his eyes. And once that's done, it's now time to adhere him to the base, and I'm using Gorilla Glue. And I didn't paint the bottom of him because I wasn't sure what glue I was going to use at first, and then I decided Gorilla Glue sticks with everything, so it should be fine. And then I do the same with the mushroom, and then it's time to build upon the base and put moss on it. And I use hot glue to do that. So then I just go in where there's any gaps and fill it in with moss and hot glue. And I do this all in the inner circle, and I also do that all in the outer circle too. But first, I didn't forget about the gems, and I got these guys from the dollar store. So I use the hot glue again, and I glue the bottom of the gem bottle and on the back side of the gem bottle, and then I just press it into the moss and the mushroom. And I do that for the both of them, and they both adhere really well. And then I continue hot gluing all around the edges and putting moss on it. And I would just like to thank everyone who watched this video. I really appreciate you. If you want to make this, please tag me in any of my socials. I have them all linked below. And now it's time for the glamour shots.